Highlights related to tensions in Europe, along with many new developments around the world, will be presented to you on today's program. The eastern Ukrainian city of Bakhmut is still the hottest spot on the front line and continues to be the target of some of the heaviest direct Russian fire, a spokesperson for the Ukrainian military told CNN. Bakhmut is still the hottest spot on the front line, with 20 of the 188 attacks of the entire Bakhmut direction this day coming directly at the town of Bakhmut, said Serhiy Cherevatiy, spokesperson for the eastern grouping of the Ukrainian armed forces. Cherevatiy also said a third wave of fighters from the Wagner private military company fighting in the area are being replaced by Russia's regular army. The first wave, which began last February, consisted of professional military, people associated with the FSB and the Interior Ministry. The second wave of Wagner consisted of those mobilized from prisons. Now we see the replacement of Wagner's group by the regular army. This is probably due to Prigozhin's conflict with the leadership of the Russian army, he added. For a time, Yevgeny Prigozhin was said to be a close ally of Russian President Vladimir Putin. But the Institute for the Study of War, ASW, said in January that the two had grown apart after Prigozhin repeatedly criticized the Russian Defense Ministry. The problem started earlier this year when Prigozhin said his Wagner army was the party that took control of the city of Soledar. While Prigozhin regularly condemns Russian officials, especially Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu, the Kremlin does not often comment on him or the Wagner group. Asked by reporters about Prigozhin last October, Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov called the mercenary leader simply a Russian citizen who made a great contribution to the country. The head of Russia's Wagner mercenary group has claimed Ukraine is preparing a counteroffensive near the city of Bakhmut. Yes, it is a well-known fact that the enemy is preparing a counteroffensive. Of course, we are doing everything we can to prevent this from happening, Yevgeny Prigozhin said on social media. He said that his private army had opened up recruitment centers across 42 cities in an attempt to replenish its ranks after suffering heavy losses fighting in the city. Mr. Prigozhin claimed new fighters were coming forward but gave no indication of the numbers involved. The centers have reportedly opened up mainly in sports centers and martial arts clubs. Russia has been pressing on the eastern salt mining town for months, leading to heavy losses on both sides. Although just days ago it was thought Ukraine could withdraw from the town, it now appears Kyiv wants to hold firm and continue its defense. A group of UN experts said on Friday the recruitment of prisoners serving sentences in Russian correctional facilities by the Russian private military company Wagner is alarming. Members of the Wagner group are reportedly offering pardons for criminal sentences and the monthly payment to the prisoners' relatives of those who agree to join, the experts said. Wagner has allegedly recruited both Russian and foreign nationals serving sentences in correctional facilities, they said, adding that in some cases, Wagner used threats, intimidation and pressure tactics to recruit. Recruited prisoners have been involved in a range of activities, including providing military services, rebuilding infrastructure, and taking direct part in hostilities on the side of the Russian forces, the statement added. The experts say they have information that several recruits have been executed for attempting to escape and, in other cases, seriously injured in public as a warning to other recruits. Such tactics constitute human rights violations and may amount to war crimes. The group has expressed its concerns to the Wagner Group and the Russian government. It has also urged Moscow to protect detainees from violence, exploitation and intimidation, according to the statement. The General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine said in a morning update on Friday Russia launched a total of 95 missiles of various types over the past day, 34 of which were intercepted, as well as a number of Iranian-made Shahid drones. Nearly 500,000 people are without power in Kharkiv, Ukraine's second-largest city, following the latest barrage of strikes, according to the regional governor. And there are concerns about how effectively Ukraine can stand up to such bombardments. But aerial strikes like these are not going to win Russia the war, Western experts say. Justin Bronk, Senior Research Fellow for Air Power and Technology, at the London-based Royal United Services Institute, RUSI, think tank, told CNN. There is a long history of nations trying to win wars through strategic bombardment, to break the will or capacity of an opposing state to resist. Russia's limited stockpiles mean it's unlikely they will force a major breakthrough in the war through the skies, so long as its air force is unable to gain supremacy above Ukraine. The use of so many different weapons systems in one night has increasingly become Russia's preferred method of striking through the skies, but with larger gaps between the raids, Bronk said. What you get is a missile that is much harder to intercept and gives your opponent much less warning. What you lose is that it's much more expensive, and often can only be carried by a much more limited number of platforms, Bronk explained. While Russia has deployed a handful of missiles that Ukraine is currently unable to stop, it appears unlikely that such attacks will become a regular or decisive feature of the conflict because, by most Western assessments, Russia is running low on supplies. Finnish Prime Minister Sanna Marin visited Kyiv on Friday, March 10, for a short one-day visit to meet Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. At a joint news conference, Zelensky expressed his gratitude to Finland for its military assistance during its 12-month conflict with neighboring Russia. In February, Finland said it would send Ukraine 3 Leopard 2 tanks suitable for mine clearing and provide training for their use. Kyiv has secured pledges from several Western nations to supply modern battlefield tanks to help fend off Russian forces. In separate remarks regarding the explosions on the Nord Stream pipeline in September, Zelensky reiterated Kyiv's stance that Ukraine had no involvement. And Zelensky also attended a memorial ceremony at St. Michael's Cathedral for a Ukrainian commander killed in fighting in the eastern city of Bakhmut. An intelligence report said, members of the Russian army have now resorted to using rusted ammunition after going through almost an entire stock of artillery ammo in the war in Ukraine. The Russian army was given new batches of artillery ammunition from storage units in other Russian regions. However, nearly half of the new ammunition is showing signs of rust. The armed forces of the Russian Federation have almost used up the entire stock of artillery ammunition kept in storage in the central part of Russia nowadays. We observed the movement of ammunition from depots located in other oblasts of Russia to the temporarily occupied territories of Ukraine, the intelligence report read. There is also an unsatisfactory state and quality of new batches of ammunition due to improper storage and violation of service rules and regulations. Almost 50% of them have visible signs of rust damage. The UAF General Staff added that, with the current conditions of hostilities in the war, the Russian army will likely suffer from an artillery shortage in the coming months. It is not the first time the Russian army was reported to be using substandard weapons in its war against Ukraine. In October of last year, the New York Times revealed that Russia has been using outdated, unguided and imprecise missiles, some of which are from the Soviet era. In September, advisor to Ukraine's Minister of Internal Affairs Anton Gashchenko shared a video on Twitter showing Russian soldiers handling rusty firearms and plastic bags to use in the war. The Russian side has not yet responded to this information. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov recently said that Ukraine is still not interested in substantive negotiations with Moscow to end the conflict. Speaking at a press conference after discussing with Saudi Foreign Minister Faisal bin Farhan Al Saud on March 9, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov said, "So far, we still have not seen the people. Our Ukrainian neighbors are willing to start serious negotiations." Lavrov added, "I have repeatedly noted that the President of Ukraine Zelensky in September last year issued a decree banning any negotiations with Russia, while Zelensky's sponsors in the West claim that Russia must be defeated on the battlefield, so that Kyiv could begin negotiations with a strong position. Everyone should judge for themselves the legitimacy of these claims." In addition, Lavrov said that Russia welcomes Saudi Arabia's interest in helping and promoting the settlement of the conflict situation as soon as possible, based on respect for the legitimate demands of Moscow, ignored by the government in Kyiv for many years. Regarding prisoner exchanges between Russia and Ukraine, Lavrov said, many exchanges have taken place, partly with the help of Saudi Arabia and other Arab countries. We are grateful for that, and believe it is necessary to keep this activity going. According to TASS, the Russian Defense Ministry announced this week that 90 Russian soldiers have been returned by Kyiv. They were airlifted to Moscow by military aircraft, then received medical treatment and rehabilitation care at a military medical center. Also on March 9, President Zelensky also denied the possibility of negotiating with the Russian side right now. In an interview aired on CNN, Zelensky said, "We do not see any suitable circumstances for dialogue with the President of the Russian Federation because he did not keep his promises. We don't trust him. Russia should leave our territory. And then we are ready to take diplomatic action. We can look for a form of dialogue with our partners, but only after the withdrawal of Russian troops," Zelensky added. A new base called Camp Viking will be established in the Nordic nation as the UK is stepping up its Arctic engagement and tightening partnership with Norway. According to the UK's Royal Navy, the operations base will lie some 120 kilometers south of the city of Tromsø, the largest in the northern part of the country. As expected, the Viking barracks will be home to the Coastal Response Team, a special unit set up by the UK to respond to military threats in the European region. Previously, Camp Viking was described as a focal point for mountain and cold weather warfare training. Although the size of the permanently deployed troops to Camp Viking has yet to be announced this winter, some 1,000 UK commandos were dispatched to the facility to participate in Joint Expeditionary Force and NATO drills. The announcement was made in the wake of the updated UK Arctic Policy Framework announced last month and follows the joint declaration to promote bilateral strategic cooperation between the UK and Norway, signed last year. In its announcement, Britain praised the bilateral Arctic cooperation that has existed since the Second World War. It was intensified in the 70s, when Norway and the Svalbard archipelago were recognized as key parts of NATO's northern flank. Norway, for its part, recently signed a new bilateral defense agreement with the US, indicating its eagerness as a NATO member. According to the agreement, the US gained the right to unimpeded access to, and use of, for designated military areas in Norway including Evans Air Station and Ramsund Naval Base, as well as extensive authority over Norwegian citizens who may come into contact with these areas. Fittingly, the stated aim for Evans Air Station, the Norwegian Air Force's most advanced base designed for its prized F-35 fighter jets and NATO's preparedness forces. Several Norwegian, UK and US officials admitted that the goal is to keep an eye on Russian submarine and other military activity in the Arctic. In southern Norway alone, the US has pledged to spend 2 billion Norwegian kroner, $200 million, on the Rig Air Station. The money is expected to be spent on aircraft hangars, ammunition storage and warehouses. Although the recent moves were praised by Norway's top brass, including Defense Minister Bjorn Arild Gram, as a contribution of NATO's defense of Norway and Europe at large, the deals sparked both popular and political opposition. However, the recent agreements still face resistance from the political opposition and the Norwegian people. Norwegian and US officials countered such fears by claiming that the arrangement is only temporary. As a founding member of NATO, Norway has been an active participant in the alliance since the signing of the North Atlantic Treaty in Washington in 1949. It has dutifully provided training and expertise to the bloc and taken part in its overseas missions. In total, around 100,000 Norwegian have taken part in nearly 100 international operations. Apart from military cooperation, Norway also remains the most important supplier of natural gas to the UK, which makes their relation even more special. Some 20,000 soldiers from 9 countries along with 50 aircraft and 40 vessels are taking part in the joint Viking winter exercise currently underway in northern Norway. The aim of the exercise is to increase preparedness and capability to conduct large-scale joint operations in challenging weather and climate. Most of the participants come from Norway and the rest from Canada, Finland, France, Germany, the Netherlands, Sweden, the United Kingdom and the United States. The exercise, which is held every 2 years, is the largest exercise held in Norway this year. Of the 20,000 soldiers, 12,000 are taking part in Joint Viking while 8,000 take part in the British-led naval exercise Joint Warrior. Joint Warrior takes place in the sea along the Norwegian coast and is closely connected with Joint Viking. Sweden's chief negotiator in the accession process said on Thursday, March 9. Turkey has acknowledged that Sweden and Finland have taken concrete steps to meet Ankara's concerns over their bids to join NATO, and the three will hold further meetings. Sweden and Finland applied last year to join NATO, but faced unexpected objections from Turkey, which says the two countries harbor members of the Kurdistan Workers' Party, PKK, considered a terrorist group by Ankara and its Western allies. Recognized by the Turkish side. As part of its efforts to reassure Turkey it is taking its fears over militants seriously, the government will introduce a new anti-terrorism bill to Parliament this week. U.S. Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency Director Jen Easterly said. The U.S. views China as its biggest cybersecurity threat amid concerns it may be learning lessons from the Ukraine conflict, as Beijing may potentially be preparing to carry out a military operation in Taiwan. Russia is the hurricane, China is climate change, Easterly said on Thursday. What I think China sees in Ukraine is the fact that they are going to hold our infrastructure at risk to have a better chance of succeeding if they do invade Taiwan, and so it's one of the reasons why we all need to Have a sense of urgency about everything to do to secure infrastructure, to build redundancy, to build resilience, to have mental overrides so you can actually withstand the types of attacks that they seek. The United States' biggest cyber threats come from Russia, China, Iran, and North Korea. Easterly said the U.S. has not seen Russia attempt to carry out any significant cyber attacks against U.S. infrastructure ever since Moscow's special military operation in Ukraine began in February 2022. China is the major threat that draws the most concern in terms of being able to potentially breach critical U.S. infrastructure, according to Easterly. Iran and Saudi Arabia agreed on Friday, March 10, to re-establish relations after years of hostility which had threatened stability and security in the Gulf and helped fuel conflicts in the Middle East from Yemen to Syria. Tehran and Riyadh agreed to resume diplomatic relations and reopen embassies within 2 months according to a statement issued by Iran, Saudi Arabia and China. Friday's agreement, signed by Iran's top security official, Ali Shamkhani, and Saudi Arabia's national security advisor Musaid bin Mohammed Al Ibn, agreed to reactivate a 2001 security cooperation accord, as well as another earlier pact on trade, economy and investment. China's top diplomat Wang Yi described the deal as a victory for dialogue and peace, adding that Beijing would continue to play a constructive role in addressing tough global issues. Meanwhile, the White House on March 10 welcomed the above efforts of the two countries. White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre told reporters that warming Riyadh-Tehran relations did not change Washington's position on the Iran nuclear deal. Efforts to revive Tehran's 2015 nuclear deal have stalled in part due to increasingly strained relations between the Islamic Republic and the West. Concerning Saudi Arabia and Iran, the two countries that lead Shiite and Sunni Muslim groups in the Middle East have been at odds for years and support opposing sides in Yemen, Syria and elsewhere. Saudi Arabia cut ties with Iran in 2016 after its embassy in Tehran was stormed during a dispute between the two countries over Riyadh's execution of a Shiite Muslim cleric. In recent years, Saudi Arabia has blamed Iran for missile and drone attacks on the kingdom's oil facilities in 2019 as well as attacks on tankers in Gulf waters. Iran denied the charges. Yemen's Iran-aligned Houthi movement has also carried out cross-border missile and drone attacks into Saudi Arabia, which leads a coalition fighting the Houthis, and in 2022 extended the strikes to the UAE. Only 1 in 3 trains were running in Belgium on Friday, March 10, rail operator SNCB/NMBS said, as public sector workers went on strike nationwide to protest over a lack of staff, reduced budgets and increased workloads. The strike also affects regional public transport, and local media reported it could impact the opening hours of some public services such as town halls and recycling parks. International train connections were also hit, with SNCB/NMBS announcing that 12 trains between Amsterdam and Brussels were cancelled. The strike on Friday is part of what the unions have coined Awareness and Action Week over a perceived understaffing and underfunding of public services. Preliminary official data showed on Friday, March 10, deforestation in Brazil's Amazon rainforest rose in February to the highest level on record for the month, highlighting challenges the new government faces to stop the destruction. President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva took office on January 1, pledging to end illegal logging after years of surging deforestation under his predecessor Jair Bolsonaro. Experts and environmental officials have warned it could take years to significantly lower deforestation after Bolsonaro cut funding and staff at key agencies. So far, there is limited data to indicate whether Lula's more aggressive conservation policies are working. Space research agency INPE's data showed 322 square kilometers, 124 square miles, were cleared in the region last month, up 62% from February 2022 and well above the average of 166 square kilometers for the period. It was also the highest since INPE's data series began in 2015. Environment Minister Marina Silva said last month, based on partial February data, that it was unusual to have high deforestation this early in the year, when heavy rains make it difficult for loggers to work in the forest. South Korea's central bank said the lagged effects of its aggressive streak of monetary tightening would have a bigger negative impact on economic growth this year than in 2022. The Bank of Korea, BOK, estimated that its 300 basis points of rate increases in the current tightening cycle would drag down the country's economic growth rate by 1.4 percentage points in 2023, according to the central bank's quarterly monetary policy report submitted to Parliament on Thursday. They are expected to lower consumer inflation by 1.3 percentage points this year, versus 0.4 4 percentage points a year before the BOK held interest rates steady last month and said it would not resume tightening if inflation followed its expected path. Governor Ri Chang-yong said on Tuesday it was too early to discuss rate cuts but that the central bank would start to consider them should the inflation rate fall toward 3% near the end of this year. On foreign exchange, the central bank's monetary tightening relieved, by some degree, the weakening pressure on the Korean won. Still, external factors such as U.S. monetary policy have had a bigger impact on foreign exchange than internal factors, it added. The report said house prices are likely to see further declines this year, given the usual persistence of negative sentiment in the property market.